Hello, I'm Janine Cody, President of the Chromosome 18 Registry and Research Society and Director of the Chromosome 18 Clinical Research Center. And I wanted to take a minute just to provide a little perspective on attitudes and tools about where we've come from and where we're going. As an older parent, I often get very focused on where we need to go and forget about appreciating all the progress that's happened before. And for newer parents, I think they may not even know what things used to be like, and I think that it helps provide some perspective and impetus to move forward. So perspective is important because it helps you understand where we've come from and how we got to where we are and why things are the way they are now. It doesn't mean we're not focused on how we want them to change and what we need to do in the future, but it really helps to understand all the ins and outs of why it is the way it is. And of course, it helps us focus on what to do next. So of course, I'm in Texas. We are all about our wildflowers. So to illustrate how I think about perspective, I have a picture of some Texas wildflowers. And for many of us who live, especially in the hill country, we're all about the flowers, and we see them and we want to get out and we want to get up close and take some pictures of the pretty flowers. But understanding where you are is really important. Because in this case, you might not want to get up too close to those flowers. This guy's pretty docile, but boy, he just turns his head and you can get wiped out pretty quick. So big picture perspective is essential. So big picture perspective. In 1964, 18p- and 18q- were first described in institutionalized children. And in that time, the advice given to parents was put them in an institution. They'll ruin your life. They'll ruin your marriage. They'll make a terrible life for your other kids. It's best to put them in an institution. They won't amount to anything. And that was the wisdom, if you want to call it that, for many, many years. And just to put that in a little bit of perspective, whoops, I went too far. In 1969, the U.S. put a man on the moon. Think of the advances in the technology and the science that went into doing that, and we were still thinking about putting children with intellectual disabilities and other developmental disabilities in an institution. Although times were changing, attitudes were changing, in 1975, the first version of what later became IDEA, was passed into law, the law that mandated that all children are eligible for public education. And so children with special needs need to be educated in the public school system. And of course, this is the culmination of a lot of attitude change and a lot of parents fighting, like my son-in-law's grandparents, fighting for a good education for their children with intellectual disability, because they knew life could be better for them than just being housed in an institution. And that really wasn't all that long ago. So we've actually come a long ways. In 1990, the Chromosome 18 Registry was formed, and at that time, the advice for parents of children with chromosome 18 abnormalities really was wait and see. What was known in the books and the literature at best was sort of a list of low-set ears, long tapering fingers, obnoxious personality, so severe mental retardation is what was used in those days. And so it really wasn't very helpful for management, and wait and see, since that's really what we were told, is a really unsatisfying answer for how can I help my child. I put 1996 here, but this was really an evolution. As soon as we started the Chromosome 18 Registry, I started finding every medical article I could find on any child with any chromosome 18 abnormality and trying to organize those to at least have a list of everything ever seen in each of the conditions, and with a list of frequency, how often those were seen. So we first, of course, had printed versions, but we had a website that went up in 1996, and that information went on the website. And so, although I picked one year, it was really sort of an evolution, and it continues to be an evolution. But at least parents were guided then by a list of potential issues. Some long tapering fingers, really? Okay, that's not anything you do anything about. But other issues were at least hints of what needed to be investigated, like the percent with cardiac issues, etc. Then in 2005 was really the first novel treatment identified. That's when we published our paper on growth hormone treatment in individuals with 18q deletions who were actually growth hormone deficient. And so that was really sort of the beginning of changing to be really proactive about what treatments can we provide for our loved ones with chromosome 18 abnormalities. And in 2017, we published our first management guides, taking all the information that we and others, but mostly us, had published, and reorganizing it in one single document for each syndrome in a way that we hope is helpful for physicians and therefore for families to help be proactive about the initial evaluation of their children and the long-term management as they get older. And in 2018, we published a much more comprehensive gene dosage map. In other words, an annotated map of all the genes on chromosome 18 with their information for their likelihood of making an impact when they were in 1 copy instead of 2, or 3 copies instead of 2, or 4 copies instead of 2. We know a lot more about deletions than duplications, but we're working on it all the time. And this allows you to then go and make at least a first draft of an individualized syndrome description by putting in the coordinates of your loved one's chromosome 18 change and seeing which genes are in the region, which you need to worry about, and what do we know about those. So we're making progress in that regard. In the 2020s now, what are we working on? Of course, working on figuring out the function of some of the key genes. If you've seen some of the other podcasts or been following this work, you know that really only just barely 10% of the genes are the ones that are really going to matter. And even a smaller number of those are the significant ones. And so we are working toward trying to understand how to regulate those genes. How do you make one gene do the work of 2? How do you kind of calm down 3 copies to do the work of only 2? So that's our current work and our future work. We're also very interested in the obstacles to independence. So intellectual disability is not a very good descriptor. We need to refine that. And it's going to be different for each of the different syndromes. So by that, I mean we need to understand what are the exact issues. Is it reaction time? Is it working memory? And there's a whole list of ways that intellectual disability can be refined by other more fine-tuned descriptors. And so we're working to understand that and figure out what those are so that we have targets on what to try to improve. And of course, we're becoming more aware of and looking for more hidden conditions. For example, problems with bone mineral density in people with tetrasomia 18p, or bleeding and clotting problems, those things that aren't readily apparent. We're investigating those even more. And of course, adult onset conditions. As our cohort ages, we are keeping our eyes out for additional adult onset conditions, either by the medical records we get from our enrolled participants. So please keep sending us medical records. We need those. We use those. But also by knowing the genes on the chromosome and their role in adult onset conditions. It helps us know to screen for certain things to see if they are in fact conditions that our loved ones with chromosome 18 abnormalities are at risk for. So those are the big kind of buckets of things that we're working on. And of course, ultimately, the goal is treatments for those specific problems. I know that's a big, hairy goal, because what we really want is a self-directed, healthy life. And it's, yes, a big, hairy goal, but, you know, you don't get there if you don't work on it. And every day we're going to get closer to that. When we get there, I don't know, but it's certainly not going to happen if we don't try, and it's certainly not going to happen if we don't do it, because if we don't do it, it just isn't going to get done. We've come a long ways from the put them in an institution, they won't amount to anything days, to really getting so much closer to a healthy life and a self-directed life. And so, in conclusion, thank you so much for supporting Chromosome 18 research. We're all in this together, and your part is as significant as mine. I'm just the one who gets to make these talks. So thank you for all you do, and I'll see you soon.